Welcome to Mint Vault USA, where today we're looking at 4 2009 Lincoln Bicentennial Pennies that may seem like ordinary cents, but some examples can become surprisingly valuable when condition, rarity, and unusual mint-made features come together. These 4 designs tell the story of Abraham Lincoln's life, from his childhood to the presidency, and we'll explore what makes certain examples worth a serious look. Stay with me, because one of these pennies could be far more interesting than it first appears. Now, let's start with the first coin. This first 2009 Lincoln Bicentennial Penny may look like an ordinary, slightly worn 1-cent coin, but its reverse carries a piece of American history that makes this series especially interesting. The coin we're looking at is the 2009 Lincoln Bicentennial Penny, featuring Lincoln's birth and early childhood in Kentucky. The famous log cabin design, with no mint mark, circulated condition, a red-brown color, light natural toning, and minor contact marks. At first glance, it may not look like something worth putting aside, but there is a good reason collectors still pay attention to these 4 2009 designs, especially when an example has unusual quality, a recognized variety, or a genuine mint era. The year 2009 was a special moment for Lincoln cents, because the United States Mint was celebrating 2 important anniversaries at the same time. It marked the 200th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, and it also marked 100 years since the Lincoln cent first appeared in 1909. To honor that history, the Mint created 4 different reverse designs during the year, each showing an important period of Lincoln's life. The first design focused on his birth and early childhood in Kentucky, followed by his formative years in Indiana, his professional life in Illinois, and finally his presidency in Washington, D.C. That makes this particular penny more than just another modern cent. It is the first chapter in a 4-coin story, and the design on the reverse was chosen to represent Lincoln's earliest years. The image shows a simple log cabin, connecting the coin to the humble beginnings of the future president. The United States Mint released this first design on February 12, 2009, the 200th anniversary of Lincoln's birth, with the launch taking place near his birthplace in Kentucky. Now look closely at the front of the coin, and you will see the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln. Victor David Brenner's Lincoln portrait had already been used on the cent for a century, and it remained on the obverse of all 4 2009 bicentennial designs. The inscriptions include "In God We Trust," "Liberty," and 2009. Turn the coin over, and the entire appearance changes, because the reverse tells a completely different part of Lincoln's story. The circulating version of this penny was made with the same basic composition used for modern cents, about 97.5% zinc and 2.5% copper. That detail is important because some collectors encounter 2009 bicentennial cents with a different composition. The Mint also produced special uncirculated and proof versions using the older bronze composition of 95% copper, 5% tin, and zinc. So if you ever compare 2 2009 pennies and notice a difference in weight, color, or surface appearance, do not immediately assume one is an error. It may be a different type of 2009 issue. The no mint mark on today's example is also completely normal. Philadelphia-produced circulating examples did not carry a mint mark, while Denver examples carried a small d. That means the absence of a mint mark does not automatically make this penny rare. In fact, millions of 2009 bicentennial cents were released from Philadelphia. What matters is what else is happening on the coin. The mint mark, or lack of one, helps establish where the coin was made, but collectors still need to examine the date, design, condition, composition, and any possible error before deciding whether an example is special. And this is where the condition of today's coin becomes interesting. Our example is circulated, with a red-brown appearance, light natural toning, and minor contact marks. It is not a perfect mint-state coin, and that is important to understand. A circulated 2009 penny should not automatically be described as extremely rare simply because it is old enough to be collectible. These coins are still relatively modern, and many survive. The real excitement comes when a normal-looking coin contains a feature that separates it from the millions of ordinary pieces. Natural toning can give an older copper-colored surface a warm brown or reddish appearance, depending on how the coin was stored and exposed to its environment. Small contact marks can develop as coins move through bags, rolls, cash registers, pockets, and other forms of circulation. Those marks are part of the coin's history, but they can also affect its grade. For collectors who care about condition, a coin with strong original surfaces and fewer marks will generally be more desirable than one that has been heavily handled. That is why you should look at this penny from several angles before making any decision about it. The goal is not simply to find a shiny surface. Instead, you are trying to determine whether anything about the coin looks different from a normal example. Maybe the lettering has an unusual appearance, perhaps the strike is noticeably weak or shifted, or a small raised feature appears where it should not be. These are the kinds of details that can turn a basic coin search into a much more interesting investigation. One area collectors often study is doubling. However, this is where beginners need to be careful, because not every apparent doubling is a true doubled die. Machine doubling, die deterioration, scratches, and damage can create shapes that look unusual under magnification. A genuine variety needs to be identified using reliable references and compared with known examples. That is especially important when a coin is being advertised online with a very high price. Other possible mint-made errors can also attract attention. An off-center strike can leave the design noticeably shifted toward one side, while a clipped planchet can create an unusual missing section along the edge. A strike-through can leave an unexpected depression or missing detail if foreign material becomes involved during striking. Die cracks and die chips can also appear as raised features on the coin. These are all different types of events, and each must be examined carefully before assigning collector value. The 2009 bicentennial cents are especially interesting for another reason. Because 4 different reverse designs were released during the same year, collectors often try to assemble complete sets. The first design shows Lincoln's birth and early childhood in Kentucky. The second represents his formative years in Indiana. The third covers his professional life in Illinois. And the fourth represents his presidency in Washington, D.C. Having all 4 designs creates a simple but meaningful collection that tells Lincoln's life story in sequence. Think about how many of these coins may have passed through American hands in 2009. People received them in change at grocery stores, restaurants, gas stations, banks, and countless other places. Some were saved immediately because the new design looked different. Others were spent without a second thought. Some entered coin jars and stayed there for years. A few were placed into albums by collectors who understood that the 4-design program was a special moment in modern U.S. coinage. That is one reason a circulated example can still be enjoyable to own. It may not have the perfect surfaces of a professionally preserved specimen, but it participated in everyday life. Someone may have received it as change on the day the design entered circulation. Another person may have placed it in a drawer and forgotten about it. Eventually, it may have found its way into a collection where someone finally noticed the date and reverse design. There is also an important difference between a coin being collectible and a coin being genuinely rare. Those 2 words are often used as if they mean the same thing, but they do not. A coin can be popular with collectors while still being available in large numbers. The 2009 bicentennial cents are a good example. The 4 designs are historically interesting and widely collected, but an ordinary circulated example does not automatically command a huge premium. The big money stories usually involve something exceptional, such as a major mint error, a recognized variety, a very high-grade specimen, or an unusual combination of characteristics that professional graders and advanced collectors can confirm. That is the part of the hobby that creates suspense. 2 pennies can have the same year and the same reverse design, yet one can remain a normal coin while the other attracts serious attention because of a feature that is easy to miss. This is also why you should never clean a potentially valuable coin. If your 2009 bicentennial penny has natural tunning, discoloration, or light surface marks, leave it alone. Do not polish it, scrub it, use chemicals, or try to make the surface shine. Cleaning can create scratches and unnatural surfaces that collectors may consider damage. A coin that looks slightly dull but has its original surface can be far more interesting than a coin that has been aggressively cleaned. If you believe you have something unusual, the safest approach is to protect it first. Hold the penny by its edges, place it in an appropriate coin holder, and keep it away from moisture and harsh chemicals. If the coin appears to have a serious mint error or an important variety, professional authentication can be worthwhile. Services such as PCGS and NGC can examine, authenticate, and grade qualifying coins, which can provide much stronger evidence of what you actually own. Now we come to the part everyone wants to know about, the value. A normal circulated 2009 Lincoln Bicentennial Penny with the Kentucky log cabin reverse is generally not a $30,000 coin simply because it has the correct date and design. That is important to say clearly, because exaggerated online listings can make ordinary coins appear much rarer than they really are. But when a genuine major mint error or exceptional certified example enters the picture, the value can move into a completely different category. For this first coin, let's use a high-end possibility of around $30,000 as the kind of figure that could be associated with an extraordinary authenticated error or standout collector specimen, not a normal circulated penny. The exact value would depend on the specific error, condition, authentication, rarity, and current buyer demand. In other words, the number is not a guaranteed price for every 2009 log cabin penny. It represents the kind of upper-level potential that makes unusual examples worth investigating rather than spending immediately. That difference matters. If you find a normal circulated 2009 Philadelphia Bicentennial cent, do not assume you have a $30,000 treasure. Instead, ask yourself whether there is something genuinely unusual about it. Does the coin show a confirmed mint error? Is there a recognized variety? Is the composition correct for the type? Does the coin have unusually strong surfaces for its condition? Can the feature be verified by a reputable source? If the answer to those questions begins to point toward something unusual, then you have a reason to investigate further. Take clear photographs, compare the coin with trusted references, and consider getting an expert opinion before trying to sell it. If a valuable error is confirmed, a reputable coin dealer or established auction company may be able to help determine the best-selling route. Avoid rushing into a private sale simply because someone online claims that your penny is worth a huge amount. And there is another reason this first coin deserves attention. It represents the beginning of the entire 2009 bicentennial story. The little log cabin on the reverse is not random decoration. It was selected to represent Lincoln's birth and early childhood in Kentucky, giving the penny a connection to the earliest chapter of his life. So when you see a 2009 penny with the log cabin reverse, remember that you are looking at the first design in a four-part history lesson created by the United States Mint. The coin may be worn, brown, or lightly toned, and those features alone do not make it rare. But if something about the strike, surface, lettering, composition, or design looks genuinely unusual, that is when it deserves a second look. And the next coin takes Lincoln's story from Kentucky into Indiana, where the reverse shows a completely different stage of his life. The design itself is more active, the story behind it is fascinating, and certain examples can become especially interesting when collectors start examining their condition and possible mint-made varieties. Now moving on to the next coin. The second 2009 Lincoln Bicentennial Penny takes us into a completely different part of Lincoln's life, and this one can be especially interesting because its condition is much stronger than the first example. The coin we're looking at is the 2009 Lincoln Bicentennial Penny showing Lincoln's formative years in Indiana, with no mint mark, an about uncirculated to circulated appearance, a red-brown color, strong remaining mint luster, and only light contact marks. At first glance, it may look like a normal modern penny, but the combination of the historical design, better surface quality, and the possibility of unusual mint-made characteristics gives collectors a reason to examine it much more closely. By 2009, the United States Mint had already spent a century producing Lincoln cents, but that year was different from anything collectors had seen in decades. Instead of keeping the same reverse design throughout the year, the Mint introduced 4 separate reverse designs to tell the story of Abraham Lincoln's life. The first design showed his birth and and early childhood in Kentucky, while the second design moved the story forward to his formative years in Indiana. This second coin represents the period when young Lincoln was growing, learning, working, and developing the character that would eventually shape his future. The reverse design shows a young Lincoln working with a rail splitter in an Indiana setting, a scene chosen to represent the years that helped form his early character. This is important because the four coins were not simply different pictures placed on the back of a penny. Each design was intended to represent a specific chapter in Lincoln's life, turning an everyday 1-cent coin into a small history lesson. For collectors, that makes the complete 2009 series especially enjoyable, because the coins can be placed together in the correct order and viewed as one continuous story. On the front, the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln remains unchanged. Victor David Brenner's famous portrait had already been part of American coinage since 1909, and it continued to appear on the obverse during the bicentennial celebration. The inscriptions include "In God We Trust," "Liberty," and the year 2009. When you turn the coin over, however, the historical scene changes completely, and that is where this particular issue becomes recognizable. The absence of a mint mark tells us that this example was produced at the Philadelphia Mint. That is a useful detail for collectors, but it is important not to confuse a missing mint mark with an error. Philadelphia cents normally had no mint mark, so a 2009 penny without a D is not automatically rare. The mint mark is mainly a clue about where the coin was produced. To determine whether the coin has something unusual, you need to examine its surfaces, strike, lettering, composition, and design details much more carefully. The composition of the circulating 2009 cent also deserves attention. Standard circulating examples were made with the modern copper-plated zinc composition used for regular Lincoln cents. The Mint also produced special versions in bronze for collectors, so not every 2009 Lincoln cent will have exactly the same composition. This is one reason collectors sometimes compare weight and appearance when they believe they have discovered an unusual example. A difference in color alone is not enough to prove a rare composition error, but a confirmed difference can become very important. Now look at the condition of the coin we're discussing. This example is much better preserved than a heavily worn pocket change penny. It has an about uncirculated to circulated appearance, with a red-brown color and strong remaining mint luster. There are light contact marks, but the surfaces still retain some of the brightness that would have been present when the coin was new. That surviving luster is important because original surface quality can make a major difference when collectors compare otherwise similar coins. A coin can be only a few years old and still develop plenty of damage. It may rub against other coins in a pocket, slide around inside a cash drawer, or spend years inside a jar where the surfaces repeatedly contact one another. Even small marks can affect a coin's grade. That is why the condition of this 2009 penny deserves attention. The fact that it still retains strong luster despite some circulation makes it more interesting than an example that has been heavily worn and dull. There is another reason collectors may want to inspect this coin carefully. Modern coins are produced at very high speed, and the minting process involves planchets, dies, presses, and many mechanical steps. When something goes wrong during production, the result can be a genuine mint error. These errors are different from scratches, stains, or damage that happened after the coin left the mint. Understanding that difference is one of the most important skills a beginning collector can learn. For example, a genuine off-center strike happens during the striking process and can leave the design noticeably shifted away from the center of the planchet. A clipped planchet can show an unusual missing section along the edge because of the way the blank was cut before striking. A strike-through can leave a strange depression or missing detail when something comes between the die and the planchet. Die cracks and die chips can also create raised features that were actually formed during production. Double dies are another area that attracts attention, but this is where patience becomes extremely important. Not every apparent doubling is a true double die. Machine doubling, contact damage, scratches, and other effects can make lettering or numbers appear unusual. A genuine variety should be compared with trusted references or examined by someone with experience. The internet is full of photographs of coins advertised as rare errors, but many of those examples are simply damaged or misunderstood. The reverse of this particular 2009 penny provides several areas that collectors can study. The lettering, the historical scene, the date, the rim, and the overall strike can all be compared with normal examples. You do not need expensive equipment to begin. A good light and a simple magnifying glass can reveal details that are difficult to see with the naked eye. The goal is not to search for something strange just because you want the coin to be valuable. The goal is to identify a feature and then determine whether that feature is actually important. The difference in approach can save collectors a lot of disappointment. Someone may find a small line near the lettering and immediately believe it is a valuable die crack. Another person may see a dark area and assume it is rare tunning. A third collector may notice a shiny surface and think the coin must be worth thousands. In each case, careful research is necessary before making a conclusion. The strong mint luster on today's example also gives us something important to discuss. Luster is the natural way light moves across the surface of a freshly struck coin. When a coin is heavily circulated, that original effect gradually becomes weaker as the surface receives contact and wear. If a 2009 cent still shows strong luster with only light contact marks, it may have been handled much less than the average coin found in circulation. This is one reason collectors often separate ordinary circulated examples from coins that approach uncirculated condition. A coin with better surfaces, stronger detail, and fewer marks can be much more desirable. However, condition alone does not turn a common coin into a rare coin. Rarity, demand, error status, and certification all play a role in determining the final market value. Imagine finding this penny inside an old jar of coins that had been stored in a closet since 2009. You begin sorting through the change, expecting nothing more than ordinary cents. Then you notice the unusual reverse design and realize it is one of the 4 bicentennial issues. The surface looks surprisingly fresh, and the red-brown color still has a little brightness under the light. You compare it with another 2009 penny and notice that this one has much stronger detail and luster. That moment is small, but it is exactly the kind of moment that keeps people interested in collecting. You have not discovered a fortune yet. You have discovered a question. Why does this coin look different? Is the difference simply condition, or is there something unusual about the strike? Is the surface original? Is the composition correct? Does the coin match a recognized variety? Those questions lead to research, and research is where coin collecting becomes much more than simply finding old money. You begin learning how coins were made, why different designs were selected, how the mint operates, and how collectors determine rarity. Even when the final answer is that the coin is common, you have learned something that helps with the next discovery. The 2009 Bicentennial program also created a strong collecting connection because people could find 4 different designs during the same year. Many families saved all 4, and some collectors built complete sets from circulation. The Indiana design is particularly memorable because it represents Lincoln's formative years, a period between his childhood in Kentucky and his later professional life in Illinois. That historical connection gives the coin another layer of appeal. Someone looking at this penny may see only a 1-cent piece, but a collector sees a small representation of Lincoln's journey. The design reminds us that before Lincoln became president, he was a young man growing up in Indiana and developing the skills, knowledge, and character that would influence the rest of his life. And because this is a Philadelphia example, the missing mint mark becomes part of the identification process. If you place it beside a Denver example, the small D on the Denver coin provides an immediate difference. This is why beginners should become comfortable identifying mint marks. They can help you determine where a coin was made and can sometimes help separate one variety from another. Still, the most important rule is simple. Never assume that a missing mint mark is an error just because a video or online listing says it is. On a 2009 Philadelphia cent, no mint mark is expected. A genuine error requires something beyond the normal characteristics of the coin. So where does the money come in? This is where we need to separate the ordinary coin from the extraordinary one. A normal circulated 2009 Formative Years penny is not automatically worth thousands of dollars. Most examples remain affordable collectibles, but when you combine a highly unusual mint era, an important recognized variety, excellent preservation, and professional authentication, the value can rise dramatically. For a truly exceptional example connected to this design, a high-end figure around $35,000 can represent the kind of value collectors might discuss for a major authenticated era or standout specimen. That is not the normal value of every 2009 Indiana design penny. It is an upper-level possibility for an exceptional coin with something genuinely rare about it. The exact market value would depend on what the unusual feature is, how rare it is, the coin's grade, and what collectors are willing to pay when that specific coin reaches the market. That distinction is extremely important for anyone watching videos about valuable coins. A headline may say that a particular date is worth $35,000, but that does not mean every coin with that date is worth $35,000. Usually, the high price belongs to a very specific example with a confirmed era or extraordinary grade. The job of a collector is to discover what separates that special example from the ordinary ones. If you think your penny could have an unusual feature, do not immediately try to sell it. First, take several clear photographs, compare the coin with trusted examples, and consider having the feature examined by a professional. If the coin turns out to be an important era, professional certification from a respected service, such as PCGS or NGC, can provide valuable documentation for potential buyers. And please do not clean it. Even though today's example has a beautiful red-brown appearance and strong remaining luster, another 2009 penny might have tunning or discoloration that someone wants to remove. That is usually a mistake. Polishing, rubbing, dipping, or using household chemicals can permanently change the surface. Collectors generally prefer coins with natural surfaces, even when those surfaces are not perfectly bright. If you eventually decide to sell a genuinely valuable example, choose the selling method carefully. A reputable coin dealer can provide an opinion and may make an offer, while an established auction house can be useful for rare pieces that are likely to attract competition. Certified coins can also be easier for buyers to evaluate because the grade and authenticity have already been reviewed by a professional service. Avoid anyone who pressures you to sell immediately or promises an enormous price without first examining the actual coin. There is something else worth remembering about this particular penny. The coin does not need to be worth thousands to be worth keeping. Collectors often save the complete 2009 Four Design series because of the story they tell. If you have the Kentucky Log Cabin, the Indiana Formative Years design, the Illinois Professional Life design, and the Washington Presidency design, you have a small historical set representing 4 important chapters in Lincoln's life. That is one of the reasons modern coin collecting can be so enjoyable for beginners. You do not always need an extremely rare coin to begin. Sometimes a simple 4-coin series is enough to start learning about history, mint marks, grading, varieties, and preservation. Then, as your knowledge grows, you begin noticing details that you would have completely missed before. And that is exactly what makes this second coin worth a closer look. Its strong remaining luster and relatively light contact marks make it more attractive than a heavily worn example, while the no mint mark Philadelphia origin gives it a clear place within the 2009 Bicentennial series. Add the possibility of a genuine mint era, and suddenly an ordinary-looking penny becomes a coin worth investigating rather than casually spending. But the story does not stop in Indiana. The third design moves Lincoln forward into his professional life in Illinois, and the appearance of that coin is quite different from the example we've just examined. It has a more naturally aged brown surface, and although it has been lightly circulated, its condition still leaves plenty for collectors to study. More importantly, the next coin gives us another opportunity to look at how design, condition, mint production, and possible errors can change the way a simple 1-cent piece is viewed. And that is where our search continues. The third 2009 Lincoln Bicentennial Penny takes us to one of the most important chapters in Abraham Lincoln's life, his professional years in Illinois. This coin may not have the bright red appearance that collectors often notice first, because the example we're examining has a natural brown color, a light patina, and signs of light circulation. Yet that does not make it uninteresting. In fact, this is exactly the kind of coin that can be overlooked because its surface looks ordinary, while the details underneath deserve a much closer inspection. If you have a 2009 penny with this reverse design, do not put it back in the spending pile until you know what you're looking at. The 2009 Lincoln Bicentennial program was created to celebrate the 200th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth and the 100th anniversary of the original Lincoln cent. Instead of using one reverse design for the entire year, the United States Mint released 4 different designs, each representing an important stage in Lincoln's life. The first showed his birth and early childhood in Kentucky. The second showed his formative years in Indiana. The third moved the story to Illinois. And the fourth represented his presidency in Washington, D.C. This third design is therefore more than a simple change on the back of a penny. It represents the years when Lincoln was building his career, developing his reputation, and becoming the leader Americans would eventually know. On today's coin, the front still carries the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln. The portrait was designed by Victor David Brenner and had appeared on the cent since 1909. The words "In God We Trust" appear above Lincoln. Liberty is placed beside his portrait, and the date 2009 appears below. Everything looks familiar from the front, but the reverse is where the story changes. Instead of the log cabin or the Indiana scene, the third reverse design represents Lincoln's professional life in Illinois. The Illinois years are a fascinating part of Lincoln's story because this was the period when his life moved far beyond his childhood. He worked in different occupations, studied law, became a lawyer, entered politics, and developed the public speaking skills that would later make him one of America's most recognized political figures. The Mint used the reverse design to capture that stage of growth, and the result gives collectors a visual connection to the years when Lincoln's public life was taking shape. Now look at the condition of the coin we're discussing. This example is lightly circulated, with a brown color and natural patina. It does not have the bright red appearance that you might see on a freshly preserved copper cent, but natural brown coloration can still be attractive to collectors when the surfaces have not been damaged or cleaned. The important word here is natural. A coin that slowly develops its color through age and storage is very different from a coin that has been deliberately altered with chemicals or polishing. That distinction is especially important with copper-colored coins. Many people see a dark or brown penny and immediately think it needs to be cleaned. They may believe that making it brighter will make it more valuable. In most cases, that is exactly the wrong approach. Collectors want to see the original surface whenever possible, and artificial cleaning can leave scratches, bright patches, or unnatural color that permanently changes the coin. The brown appearance of this 2009 penny can therefore be part of its story rather than a reason to reject it. Light circulation may have removed some of the original mint luster, while normal exposure to air and the environment may have changed the surface color over time. The key is whether the color looks natural and whether the surface still has its original texture. This is also where condition becomes interesting. A lightly circulated coin can still show strong design detail, especially when compared with a heavily worn example. Look at Lincoln's portrait and the major features of the reverse. If the highest points remain sharp and the lettering is clear, the coin may have experienced only limited use. Even if the overall color is brown, preserved detail can still make the coin attractive to collectors. But condition alone is not enough to create a huge value. That is something every collector should understand before getting excited about a high price shown online. A normal 2009 professional life penny in circulated condition is not automatically a rare coin worth thousands of dollars. The big money possibilities generally require something exceptional, such as a major mint error, a recognized variety, an unusual composition, or an extremely high grade. So, as we examine this coin, the real question is not simply, is it a 2009 penny? The better question is there anything unusual about this particular 2009 penny? That change in thinking is what separates casual searching from serious coin hunting. Start with the date. Make sure the digits are clear and have the normal shape. Then look at the lettering around Lincoln's portrait. Check the rim and the edge for anything unusual. Turn the coin over and examine the reverse design carefully. Compare it with another 2009 example if you have one available. When you compare two normal coins side by side, differences become much easier to recognize. A magnifying glass can help, but you do not need expensive equipment to begin. Good lighting is often more important. Tilt the coin slowly under the light and watch how the surface reflects it. Natural luster moves across a coin in a particular way, while scratches, cleaning marks, and damage can create very different patterns. If you notice an unusual raised line, missing detail, strange lettering, or an area that looks like it was struck differently, take a closer look before reaching any conclusion. One of the most exciting possibilities is a doubled die, but again, this is an area where collectors need to be careful. True doubled dies are created during the die-making process and can show a genuine secondary impression in parts of the design. Damage or machine doubling can look similar to an inexperienced eye, but it is not the same thing. That is why comparison with trusted references is so important. The same applies to die cracks and die chips. A die crack can create a raised line on the coin because the die itself developed a crack before striking the planchet. A die chip can produce a raised area where part of the die surface broke away. These features can be interesting, but the size, location, shape, and authenticity all matter. A random scratch caused after the coin left the mint does not carry the same collector value as a genuine mint-made feature. Off-center strikes are another type of error worth understanding. If the planchet was not positioned correctly when it was struck, part of the design can appear shifted toward the edge. The more dramatic the error, the more interesting it can become, especially when the date remains visible. A small shift may be less important, while a major off-center strike can attract much more attention. Clipped planchets are also worth knowing about. Before a coin is struck, metal sheets are punched into blanks called planchets. If the punching process goes wrong, part of the blank can be missing. When that unusual blank is later struck, the finished coin can show a distinctive curved or straight missing section. Again, the key is determining whether the feature was created at the mint or happened later through damage. This is why the phrase mint error should never be used too quickly. A coin can be scratched, bent, stained, corroded, or damaged after it leaves the mint, and none of those things automatically make it rare. A genuine error must be connected to the manufacturing process. That is why professional authentication can be so valuable when a potentially important coin is discovered. Now think about where this particular penny may have been before reaching your hands. The 2009 bicentennial cents were released into everyday circulation, so millions of people handled them. Some were placed into coin jars, others were spent immediately, and many were saved because people recognized the 4 different designs. A penny could have passed through a grocery store, a bank, a restaurant, or a family cash drawer before disappearing into a collection. Perhaps someone saved the complete set without realizing that one coin had a subtle difference. Maybe the coins stayed inside an old album for years, or perhaps this lightly circulated example was simply placed in a drawer because someone liked the Lincoln design. Decades later, another person finds it and begins asking questions. That is one of the great things about coin collecting. The person who originally saved a coin does not always know what makes it interesting. Sometimes the second or third owner is the person who finally notices the important detail. The third reverse is especially enjoyable for collectors because it represents Lincoln's development from a young man into a professional and political figure. The coin gives you a chance to connect the object in your hand with the larger story of American history. Instead of simply seeing a number and a portrait, you begin to see a timeline. The first coin in our video represented Lincoln's birth and early childhood in Kentucky. The second showed his formative years in Indiana. This third coin moves the story forward into Illinois, where his professional and political life grew. The final design would take the story to Washington, D.C., where Lincoln served as president during one of the most difficult periods in American history. That sequence is one reason the 4 coins make such a satisfying collection. Even if none of them contains a major error, together they tell a story that is easy for beginners to understand and enjoyable for experienced collectors to complete. But there is another detail that deserves attention, and that is the missing mint mark. Because this coin has no mint mark, it is a Philadelphia issue. That does not automatically make it rare. Philadelphia traditionally did not place a mint mark on its Lincoln cents, so the absence of a letter is normal for this coin. A Denver example would normally have a small d. Understanding this simple difference can prevent a lot of confusion when searching through 2009 pennies. Some online sellers describe no mint mark coins as rare simply because they do not have a letter. That description can be misleading. The missing mark is normal for Philadelphia-produced cents. What can make a particular coin interesting is everything else about it, including its condition, composition, variety, or genuine error. The composition can also be worth checking if you believe you have something unusual. Standard circulating 2009 cents used the modern copper-plated zinc composition, while special collector versions were also produced using bronze. That means color alone cannot tell you exactly what the coin is made of. A professional examination and proper weighing can be much more useful when composition is part of the question. Now imagine you are looking through a jar of old pennies and you find this exact type of coin. It has a natural brown color, light circulation, and a little remaining surface quality. Nothing looks dramatic at first. Then you notice something around the design that does not match another example. Maybe the lettering appears slightly different, or a raised feature seems to run through part of the design. This is where you stop. You do not polish it. You do not scratch it. You do not try to scrape away the brown color. Instead, you take a clear photograph, compare it with trusted examples, and begin researching. That simple decision could be the difference between preserving a potentially valuable coin and accidentally damaging it. The temptation to clean an old penny is understandable. People naturally think a brighter coin must be a better coin, but collectors often care much more about originality. A naturally toned surface may be completely acceptable, while a freshly polished surface can be viewed as damaged. So if you have a 2009 Bicentennial Penny that looks dark or brown, leave it exactly as you found it until you know what you have. Now let's talk about the value, because this is where the story becomes much more exciting. A normal circulated 2009 Professional Life Lincoln Bicentennial Penny is not a $30,000 coin simply because it has this design. The high prices belong to exceptional examples, not ordinary pieces. However, if a coin has a major authenticated mint error, a highly desirable variety, or an unusually strong certified grade, the market can become much more competitive. For an exceptional example with a major, authenticated error or standout collector characteristics, a high-end figure around $40,000 can represent the kind of value that makes serious collectors stop and pay attention. Again, that is not a guaranteed value for every 2009 Illinois design penny. It would depend on the exact error or variety, the condition, authentication, rarity, and actual buyer demand. The coin must prove why it deserves that level of attention. This is an important lesson for anyone searching for valuable coins. A high number is only meaningful when there is a reason behind it. A coin listed online for $40,000 does not necessarily mean someone has actually paid $40,000 for a similar coin. Real market value is based on genuine transactions, confirmed rarity, condition, and collector demand. If you believe your coin has serious potential, professional grading may be worth considering. PCGS and NGC are two well-known grading services that can authenticate and grade qualifying coins. Certification does not magically make a common penny rare, but when a coin really is unusual. Professional documentation can make it much easier for buyers to understand exactly what they are purchasing. When it comes time to sell, do not rush. A potentially valuable coin deserves more than a quick transaction with the first person who offers money. A reputable coin dealer can provide an opinion, while an established auction house may be useful for a genuinely rare piece. If you decide to sell online, use a platform with established buyer protections and keep detailed photographs and certification information. Most importantly, remember that the brown color on today's coin is not something you need to remove. The natural patina is part of the coin's current appearance, and preserving the original surface is usually safer than trying to improve it. Store the coin in a proper holder, keep it dry, and avoid touching the surfaces unnecessarily. There is something almost poetic about this third coin. Lincoln's professional life was a period of growth, change, and opportunity. The coin itself can also become a small lesson in patience. You may look at it and see an ordinary brown penny. A more experienced collector may see the design, the condition, the mint origin, the surface, and the possibility of something unusual. The difference is knowledge. And that is why I always recommend learning before buying, selling, or cleaning. The more you understand about mint marks, errors, varieties, composition, and grading, the easier it becomes to separate a genuinely interesting coin from an ordinary one. The fourth and final 2009 Bicentennial Penny takes us to the most dramatic chapter of Lincoln's life, his presidency in Washington, D.C. The reverse design shows the U.S. Capitol under construction, connecting the coin to a period of enormous change in American history. But there is another reason the final coin deserves your full attention, because when we look at its condition, natural color, and possible collector value, the story becomes even more interesting. And this final coin may be the one you want to examine most carefully. The final 2009 Lincoln Bicentennial Penny brings us to the most dramatic chapter in Lincoln's life, his presidency in Washington, D.C., and this particular example has a very different look from the earlier coins we have examined. The coin has the fourth reverse design, showing the U.S. Capitol under construction, with no mint mark, a lightly circulated condition, a brown color, and a natural patina. At first, it may look like nothing more than an ordinary brown penny that has spent some time in circulation. But this final design carries a powerful piece of American history, and there are several details that can make an example worth a much closer examination. When the United States Mint created the 2009 Lincoln Bicentennial Program, the goal was to tell Lincoln's story in 4 stages. The first design represented his birth and early childhood in Kentucky. The second represented his formative years in Indiana. The third showed his professional life in Illinois. And this fourth design represented his presidency in Washington, D.C. The 4 reverses were released during 2009, giving collectors an unusual opportunity to follow the life of one historical figure through a single year of circulating coinage. The final reverse is especially meaningful because it connects the penny to Lincoln's years as president, a period that included the American Civil War and some of the most difficult decisions in the nation's history. The design shows the United States Capitol under construction, a fitting image for a country going through enormous change. The Capitol itself was still being developed during Lincoln's presidency, and the Mint used this image to represent the challenges and growth surrounding that period. Turn the coin over, and you will still see the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse. Victor David Brenner's portrait remained on the front throughout the Bicentennial series, keeping a visual connection with the original Lincoln cent introduced in 1909. The inscriptions include "In God We Trust," "Liberty," and the date 2009. The reverse is what identifies this final stage of the bicentennial story. Now, the first thing I want you to notice about this example is its brown color. Some collectors see a brown penny and immediately assume that it is damaged or worthless, but color by itself does not tell the whole story. A naturally toned surface can develop over time as the metal reacts with the surrounding environment. What matters is whether that color appears natural and whether the underlying surfaces have been preserved. This coin is described as lightly circulated, so it has experienced some contact and handling, but it has not been worn down like a heavily circulated penny. That means the major design details can still remain clear. When you examine a coin like this, look at the highest points of Lincoln's portrait and then compare the detail on the reverse. If the important features are still sharp and the lettering remains strong, that tells you the coin did not spend a long time being heavily handled. The lack of a mint mark is another detail beginners often misunderstand. A 2009 penny without a mint mark was normally produced at the Philadelphia Mint, so the missing letter is expected. A Denver-produced example normally carries a D. This means that the absence of a mint mark on this final bicentennial design does not automatically make it a rare error. That is an important lesson because the phrase, "no mint mark," can sound exciting in a video title, but collectors need to know which coins are supposed to have one. A missing mint mark becomes truly interesting only when it is missing where a mint mark should normally appear, or when it is connected to a recognized variety or other unusual production feature. On a normal Philadelphia 2009 cent, no mint mark is simply part of the coin's identity. The composition is also worth understanding. Regular circulating 2009 cents were made using the copper-plated zinc composition used for modern Lincoln cents. The Mint also produced special collector versions with bronze composition. Because of that, you should not try to identify a rare composition simply by looking at the color. A brown appearance does not automatically mean the coin is made of bronze, and a reddish appearance does not automatically mean it has an unusual metal content. If you believe you have a composition error, proper weighing and professional testing are much safer than guessing. A small digital scale can be useful as a first check, but an unusual weight alone does not prove an error. Dirt, damage, plating problems, or other factors can affect what you see. Professional examination becomes especially important when a potential error could have significant value. Now let's focus on the reverse, because this is where the final chapter of the Bicentennial series comes alive. The Capitol under construction gives the coin a sense of movement and unfinished work, which fits the story of a nation being reshaped during Lincoln's presidency. When you place this coin beside the first three designs, you can almost see Lincoln's journey unfolding in front of you. That is why many collectors enjoy completing all four 2009 reverses. The first coin begins with the log cabin in Kentucky, the second moves to Indiana, the third follows Lincoln's professional life in Illinois, and the fourth brings the story to Washington, D.C. The designs are connected, yet each one has a different visual character. For a beginner, this can be a great way to learn how collecting works. You do not have to begin with a rare 19th century coin or a valuable gold piece. You can begin with 4 cents from the same year, then learn to identify the different designs, mint marks, conditions, and possible varieties. But this is where the final coin becomes especially interesting for treasure hunters, because a coin can be common in its basic form while rare in a particular era or variety. Imagine finding this penny in an old jar. It has a brown surface, a little natural patina, and some light signs of circulation. Nothing immediately screams rare. You almost toss it back into the jar. Then, under good lighting, you notice a feature that does not seem to match another example. That is the moment when you slow down. You compare it with a normal coin. You look at the lettering. You examine the date. You inspect the rim. You check the reverse design. And you begin asking whether the unusual feature was created at the mint or caused later by damage. That last question is extremely important. Suppose you find a line across the surface. It might be a die crack, but it could also be a scratch. If the feature is raised and follows a pattern consistent with a die problem, it deserves further research. If it is a thin groove cut into the surface, it is much more likely to be post-mint damage. The same principle applies to strange shapes around the rim. A true clipped planchet can be valuable because the blank itself was improperly cut before striking. But a coin that was damaged by a machine after leaving the mint is a completely different situation. Learning to recognize the difference can save you from confusing damage with a valuable error. Off-center strikes are another feature collectors look for. If the coin was not properly centered between the dies, part of the design can be shifted toward the edge. A dramatic off-center strike can be very collectible, especially when important information, such as the date, remains visible. Small irregularities, however, should not automatically be treated as major errors. You may also hear collectors talk about doubled dies. These are among the most famous era varieties, but they are often misunderstood. True double die characteristics come from the die-making process and can produce a genuine secondary image in specific areas of the design. Machine doubling can create a flatter, shelf-like appearance and is not the same thing. A scratch or worn lettering can also look strange under magnification. This is why experienced collectors compare suspected error with known examples instead of relying on excitement alone. If something looks unusual, document it first. Take clear photographs under good lighting, compare it with a normal coin, and check reliable references. If the feature still appears significant, then professional authentication becomes the next step. The natural brown patina on today's example is another reason you should not clean it. A lot of people believe that a brown penny is worth less because it is not shiny, and they try to restore the bright copper appearance. But once a coin is polished or chemically treated, its original surface can be permanently changed. Collectors often use color designations such as red, red-brown, and brown when describing copper coins, especially when grading higher quality examples. Natural color can be part of a coin's condition and history. If you have a potentially valuable coin, preserving that surface is much safer than trying to make it look new. So if you find a 2009 bicentennial penny with natural brown tunning, leave it alone. Do not use vinegar, baking soda, metal polish, jewelry cleaner, or any other household product. Even rubbing the coin with a cloth can create fine scratches. Handle it by the edges and place it into a suitable holder. Now let's talk about the question that brought you here. How much could this final penny be worth? A normal circulated 2009 Lincoln Bicentennial Penny with the Washington, D.C. reverse is not automatically a high-value coin. Millions were produced, and many examples still exist. The real opportunity comes when a coin has a rare, authenticated error, an important variety, exceptional preservation, or another feature that creates strong collector demand. For a truly extraordinary example, a high-end figure around $45,000 can represent the kind of value that might be discussed for a major authenticated error or exceptional specimen connected to this design. That number should not be interpreted as the normal price of a circulated 2009 penny. A coin would need to provide strong evidence for that level of value, and the final selling price would depend on authentication, grade, rarity, and actual market demand. This is an important point because online coin listings can sometimes create unrealistic expectations. Anyone can place a $45,000 asking price on an ordinary penny, but an asking price is not the same as a confirmed sale. Serious collectors look at actual auction results, recognized varieties, certified grades, and documented errors when deciding what a coin may be worth. If you believe your final bicentennial penny has something special, the best move is patience. Protect it, research it, and get an expert opinion before trying to sell it. If it is authenticated and valuable, you may have several options. A reputable coin dealer can evaluate it, while an established auction company may be appropriate for a rare coin that could attract multiple serious bidders. Professional grading can also make a difference. Companies such as PCGS and NGC can authenticate and grade qualifying coins. A professional grade does not automatically create value, but it can give buyers confidence when the coin really is rare or unusually well preserved. And if you do sell, do not let excitement push you into accepting the first offer you receive. If the coin is genuinely rare, compare opinions. Ask what makes the coin valuable, what evidence supports the price, and whether the buyer has experience handling similar pieces. A trustworthy professional should be willing to explain the reasoning behind the offer. There is also a practical reason to keep the 2009 designs together if you have them. The series works as a complete historical set. The Kentucky design begins the story, Indiana continues it, Illinois shows Lincoln's professional development, and Washington, D.C. completes the journey with his presidency. That means even a normal example can have a place in a collection. And then there is the possibility that one of those 4 coins contains something unusual. That is where the excitement begins. A coin that looks ordinary can sometimes have a feature that takes only a few seconds to notice, but identifying that feature correctly can require years of knowledge. This is why serious collectors do not judge a coin only by how old it looks. They study the date, mint mark, design, composition, strike, surface, condition, and possible varieties. The 2009 Bicentennial Pennies are a perfect example of this idea. They are modern coins, yet they carry a major historical story. They were created to honor the 200th anniversary of Lincoln's birth and the 100th anniversary of the Lincoln cent, and their 4 reverse designs were meant to show different stages of his life. So if you find one in your pocket change, do not dismiss it simply because it is a modern penny. Look at the reverse and identify which of the 4 designs you have. Check the mint mark, examine the surfaces, and look for genuine mint-made features. If the coin has natural tunning, preserve it rather than trying to make it shiny. And remember, the biggest mistake you can make with a potentially valuable coin is assuming you already know what it is worth. Research first. Protect the coin. Then get professional advice if the evidence suggests something unusual. If you have a collection of these pennies, storing them properly is just as important. Keep them in holders designed for coins, avoid high humidity, and do not store them loose where they can rub against one another. For valuable pieces, proper storage can help protect the surfaces and make future examination much easier. Now, after looking at all 4 designs, we can see why the 2009 Lincoln Bicentennial cents are so interesting. The first coin tells the story of Lincoln's birth and early childhood in Kentucky. The second takes us through his formative years in Indiana. The third follows his professional life in Illinois. And this final coin brings us to his presidency in Washington, D.C. Each coin has its own story, its own design, and its own collector appeal. And while the ordinary examples may not be worth enormous amounts, the possibility of a genuine mint era, rare variety, unusual composition, or exceptional grade is what keeps collectors checking these coins. So the next time a 2009 Bicentennial penny lands in your hand, take a second look before spending it. The brown color may simply be natural patina. The missing mint mark may simply indicate Philadelphia. The light contact marks may simply show normal circulation. But if you discover a feature that does not belong there, that is when the coin deserves your full attention. Because sometimes, the difference between an ordinary penny and a valuable discovery is not the date printed on the coin, but one small detail that almost everyone else overlooked. And that is the real lesson of the 2009 Lincoln Bicentennial series. A coin does not have to look impressive to be worth investigating. Sometimes the most interesting discoveries are sitting quietly in old jars, drawers, albums, and collections, waiting for someone with enough patience to look twice.